Hello, and welcome to the Media Center's 8th Local Hero Award series, in which we showcase 6 people from the Mid-Peninsula for outstanding achievement or contributions to the community. We solicited nominations and were particularly looking for the unsung heroes. Each winner is an inspiration, and each has a great story to tell. There was a time when Cesar Chavez and Green Oaks Academy in East Palo Alto were not doing well. But ever since Amika Guillaume became principal 4 years ago, it's been on a clear road to improvement. Raised by immigrant parents, Amica spent her youth doing menial jobs and constantly moving around the country, attending 27 different schools as a child. So it was probably surprising that she managed to make her way through college, then teach for America, where again she moved through many schools across the country, and finally ended up at Harvard University, where she earned her master's in education. This opened many doors, but nevertheless, she was drawn to East Palo Alto to work with families much like her own. Some say it's among the most challenging communities to work in. But for Amika Guillaume, it's her home away from home, where the poverty and even the violence are things she is intimately familiar with. Amika, what you do and who you are as a person seems to be strongly influenced by your childhood. Tell me, what are the most significant influences from your past?
I think definitely my grandparents and my parents. My grandfather's from the Philippines and my grandmother on my mother's side, and he fought for the United States Army. That's how he became a U.S. citizen. My father came from a communist country, which was Czechoslovakia, and so his experience of being Holocaust survivors and then being here in the United States where he specifically had political asylum gives you a sense of gratitude, and it gives you a tremendous, I think, value and respect and a definite sense of gratefulness to be here. So I definitely approach every day grateful for what the sacrifices were of those before me so that I could have this pretty awesome life here in the United States.
So you yourself are not an immigrant, but you're closely tied to that whole immigrant experience.
Yes.
And even that phrase, the immigrant experience, seems to have a fascination for both people who are new immigrants and who aren't. Tell me a little bit about that, about when you look at the world through the immigrant eyes of, let's say, your parents. What do you see that's different from those who aren't immigrants?
I think for most of my experiences, I will always draw to the fact that I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so appreciative because whatever complaint I had as a child, there was always a reference to, do you know where your grandmother was at this time? Or do you know the sacrifices of your grandfather? So anything that I was experiencing was always, I think, humbled or brought down to earth because someone had it worse or someone had it more difficult or you have it so wonderful.
But doesn't every parent say that? I'm wondering if there's something about a reference to a different country and different time that is different from the classic parent saying, oh yeah, I had it worse.
Well, I definitely think there's something really raw and real about a grandfather who survived the Batang Death March. And something very raw and real about a grandmother who was on the train station watching her mother and grandmother being shipped off to Auschwitz. So for maybe some, it might be a story they read about because they read Anne Frank or something like that, and they feel, wow, that was hard. But when that's your experience as those are your people before you, it's different. It's so close. I know it seems like it was, generations before me or even just a generation, but it's always a deference to those that came before me and always a respect. And I think it gives you a sense, in my case, it gave us a definite sense of urgency. And my father would always say, you're not going to waste any minute. And so everything that we've done as children, for speaking on behalf of my the 5 of us, is always must be perfect, must be wonderful, because you're living the life of those before you who couldn't live their life the way that you get to. So I know every parent says that you'd be grateful, 3 miles in the snow, uphill both ways.
Exactly.
And for sure, I can only speak for myself and for my family, and I can say that it was serious business in our household because you had to live for those who couldn't before you.
Now, I'm thinking also of the clientele, your students, and the world you live in now with a lot of immigrants. Do you think that there is a sense when you physically do not have your past around you, when you're new and you don't have your heritage surrounding you all the time, do you think there's a greater sense or greater need to internalize it and carry it with you inside?
For me in particular, because I work with predominantly people of color, and I don't look like a person of color, but I feel like a person of color because I am half, I have to, because I have to use the stories of my childhood or explain the things I have in common with my parents of my students because I don't want them to assume something else. So when I walk in the room and there's a mother crying because her son lied to her or didn't do what he was supposed to do, and I get incensed because I am sitting there and she says, all you have to do is your schoolwork. And I look at her hands and oh, they look familiar. They kind of look like mine. We've been cleaning houses using harsh chemicals and not any gloves. And I can reference that in the meeting. And I say, how dare you? How dare you let your mother down? Look at my hands. Do you know what sacrifice is? This is not normal for a woman to have hands like a man that are so rough and calloused. And then the mother starts looking at her hands, or in one case it was a father, starts crying because I saw he had paint all over his hands. And being able to be, I think, intimately in tune with where the families are coming from and to know what it means to work when you're tired and it's cold outside, or just, it is not a white collar situation. And to be able to have the parents trust that I know when they say that they're working hard for their child to be able to study, and when the child is not doing his or her part, that, and I'll even say it in the meetings, I'll say, you might as well stick up your middle finger to your mother. Because the sacrifices your families have made so you can come here and live a white collar life, because that's what it is to be a student. You're living a white collar life.
Now, the flip side of this for you is you're talking about the gratitude you felt at being here. On the other hand, you went to 27 different schools, I think it was, and then you did Teach for America, and you did the same sort of thing.
Did the circuit.
Not everything you saw pleased you. Tell me about that.
Yes. Yeah, I think that one thing for sure, that's why I'm sort of obsessed with this idea to truly live out the idea that no matter where you're born in this country, you should have the opportunity to attain an excellent education. And that's the vision of Teach for America, and that is something that has always been driving me. And I say that because I went to some schools in some neighborhoods that were terrible. And I went to other schools that were phenomenal. And it really mattered which area of the country I was in or which neighborhood I was in, or did the school think of me as a child who was there because I was gay, or a child that was shipped in because I was from the community of color, because I had to do busing at some point in my life. So we went from Wrigley and Long Beach to Lakewood because they were taking the smart kids of color and integrating Lakewood. So I was a part of several experiments in education. And I think that trying to get to this point of what drives this obsession with making equity in education, it shouldn't matter. Every school should provide quality education if we truly want to live up to this idea that democracy is built on quality education.
And is it worse for immigrants? And if so, how?
So if you are not a part of the American United States education system, you are unfamiliar with the way it works. And I say that because I remember seeing how other people were getting help in ways that I didn't get, encouragement in ways that I didn't get. I think were it not for my high school guidance counselor, I would not even pursue college in a four-year university the way that I should have. It's interesting because you can have a grandfather like I did who said, you're going to Harvard, you're going to Harvard. Cool, I'm going to Harvard. Then it comes closer to that point in your life. Did I have AP classes? No, I didn't think about AP classes. Mom didn't want to pay for the test. She thought that they were a waste of money. Did I have really good SST scores? I had okay SAT scores, but she wasn't going to pay for a prep class, and I certainly barely got her to pay for the class. She said, that's a waste of money. You should go to junior college. And then to see other folks who had these prep courses, who had people helping them with applications, I couldn't even apply because my parents hadn't done their taxes. Wow. So there were all these things that people take for granted, that of course I'm going to support my child to get to college. Now, if you are a middle-class American who knows what that means, there are a lot of things that their children probably take for granted. If you're an immigrant and you don't know what that means, the required coursework, the A through G requirements, the testing, the money for testing, then you're sort of like me, wondering, oh, begging which uncle can you help me pay for this test, or which work am I going to do so I can pay for this test?
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something a lot more raw, and that is violence. You face it, I assume, in your school, in the community, and in the same way that your past with education in general and the immigrant experience has influenced you. You had an event in your life that that was significant. It was a brush with violence. It was a tragedy that a lot of your students come up against. Tell me what happened.
So in 2001, my little sister was 15, and she was murdered a Saturday night at a school party. I wouldn't say it was a school party, at a party where there were other teenagers. And what specifically I relate to in my work is that she had some words with a girl. The girl didn't appreciate the way she was being spoken to, so she decides to call her older sister. Her older sister drives up to this scene and kills my little sister because of a few things that happen at schools and actually in regular TV shows and movies all the time. The first thing is when people talk to each other. If someone takes offense at the way that you speak to them, you don't know how incensed or angry or what that will start. So you have to be careful in how you speak to people. The second step was when people want to see a fight, they create this circle. And so in my sister's case, she had that misunderstanding with the girl before. 2 hours later, she's waiting in front of the house for her ride, and this car rides up and they say, "Where's that girl? Where's that girl? That Mexican girl? Where's that Mexican girl? She was talking to my sister." And that's what the witnesses were talking about, how she was referring to my sister and looking for her. And then once she found my sister, everyone, there were about 40 witnesses, created a circle, and they start chanting, "Fight, fight, fight." And my sister, according to witnesses, raises up her hands and says, "Wait, listen to my side of the story." The girl rushes her and shoves a knife in her that then hits her heart, and she falls to the ground dying, at which time they start kicking her, and everyone's still chanting, "Fight, fight, fight." And if it were today, they'd probably pull out their phones and start filming. So this experience that my family went through, one that I would never wish on anyone, is something that I remind myself of, unfortunately, a little more regular than anyone should, because those situations come up in children's lives a little too often. You know, someone brushes with someone and they take offense and then they start arguing. Relax. Or even in movies it happens, or I was watching a TV show and a movie and they say, "Oh, there's a fight," and part of the scenario is to go and cheer it on. So it's something on a regular basis we unfortunately, or I unfortunately have to remind myself to use to teach the kids that they don't want that.
Well, how do you, when there's a fight, how do you use that experience to intervene?
Fortunately, there aren't so many fights anymore because I think word's gotten out that you will see the wrath of Miss Guillaume, and that dragon will come out and they will feel what it feels like to see her super angry. When we did have gang problems, when we did have a lot of violence at our schools, and that was now 10 years ago, I'm proud to say, I would bring them into the room and I would tell them about my sister's story, and I even make them watch a bit of the footage of the program that was done about it, because I wanted them to see me, someone I'd like to believe they respect and look up to, really pained and really sad, so that they can have this really visceral experience of what does it mean to lose someone because of violence. And unfortunately for a lot of my students, it then reminds them of their own loss. And even more unfortunate, maybe even a recent loss in our community. There are shootings every once in a while that result in a death, and it's a small neighborhood, and someone knows someone, and before you know it, they start thinking about that. And so it is something that we unfortunately have to talk about and sort of come to terms with on very personal levels, so that it doesn't happen to the extent that someone actually dies. I know I'm kind of, yeah, it's complicated.
Well, on a personal level, what has this done to change you and your whole outlook? And if there is a gift from your sister, what is it?
Well, it's kind of funny because I grew up in a very tough immigrant family where you don't say I love you, you don't really hug. And that is what came from this, is I tell the kids at school every day, we love you, it's because I love you, or come here, my love. So the word love is now regularly used in my vocabulary because the idea that every day is a present, is a gift, is very real to me. You never know when someone's going to come in and out of your life. And for my students, more than anything, it's really important that all of us on campus, all of the adults, express that we adore them and we love them and we really care about them. And so every interaction, no matter what ridiculous thing they might have done, I will always preface it with, it is because I love you that I'm going to tell you this. I'm not shy about doing that like I used to be. Ironically, though, I have to say, I probably do it more at work than I do at home because I still am modeling being a parent on what I grew up with.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
So that's unfortunate, maybe.
Well, you have said something that I found interesting about the families you deal with. A lot of schools say it's absolutely key to bring in the parents. You have said, I try to take the parents out of the equation. What does that mean?
So it's interesting because as a child, my parents were not involved in my education in a way that is typical middle class involvement. You know, show me your homework, let's talk about it. Never, ever, ever. And then as I got older, even if there was this one time a teacher called her home, wanted to complain about me, and my father sort of, that's your job. You're the professional. Why are you bothering with me with this? And hung up the phone. And it's even true, especially in Spanish, it's the maestro. We are the master of our craft. We should be able to do what we need to do with the kids, period. And so there's a huge challenge that we have to prepare our kids for middle class, being college students, where parents are uber involved, with families that don't understand that context. That's what I'd like to understand. That's at least what I understand. They want to do what's right for their kids, but they're not coming from a background where their involvement in school is part of the game. And so a lot of times I will make every opportunity for families to be involved. I love working with the parents, and we have our core group, and even they get incensed that there aren't more parents. But at the same time, we're going to do everything for our children, our students, regardless of what the parent situation is. I'm not going to bemoan the parents that aren't doing this or doing that for a few reasons. One is culturally they don't have the background that we want to, oh, but they should be doing this. No, they shouldn't if they don't know anything about it. And also, I think it's important to realize that a lot of them are working 2-3 jobs. They often will get home at 7:30 to make sure their child can go off to school and take care of the home while their child's at school and then go off to work again, assuming that their middle school child is taking care of the house while they're at work.
What would you most like people to know about your job and your community that you think they really don't get?
So here we are in the Silicon Valley. When I started in this field here in the Silicon Valley, I had a flip phone at best. Now I have a smartphone, right? And the capabilities of my telephone are out of this world. In that same amount of time, my school continues to do what it's done those last 10 years without the same speed of innovation, access to resources like we have with the phones. I say that because here we are in the Silicon Valley, and I am dealing with inequities that are crazy. I have called the ambulance without being able to reach families because their phones, they have some issues with that. I have had to deal with students who are not sure if they're going to have food in the refrigerator. There are so many inequities that are common here in the Bay Area that I think people are unfamiliar with. because we're moving at the speed of technology, just in general. The average person in the Bay Area is that. But in education, we're moving at glacier speeds. And when you're talking about education in an area of poverty, the glacier speed is even somehow slower than glacier speed. And it's just, I think, a challenge to this area, to the Bay Area, that, okay, we have the means, we have the money, we have people who want to give back. It's our core value as being the progressive Bay Area. And yet we have schools in the shadow of the Tower of Stanford that are struggling in ways that they should not have to struggle. So if we truly believe in the cornerstone of a democracy is quality education, I feel like this is the place to make it happen. This is the place where we can make it happen. And I challenge constantly people in this area to get involved and figure out how we can be the exception to the rule. And the exception being that Ivy Leagues all over this country have an area of poverty around the corner. And people sometimes say, the cynics in them, they do that on purpose because they want to have a place to study. That's absurd. And I want the people in this area to understand that that's unconscionable. And I hope that they do, and I hope they do something to make a difference.
That is a perfect note to go out on. And best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I want to thank our crew, and thank you for watching. Do you know someone who has overcome significant hardship and has an inspiring story to tell? Someone who has sacrificed or given over and above to the community and deserves some recognition? If so, please contact us with your nomination for next year's Local Hero Awards. To find out more about our local heroes and to watch interviews with all the winners, visit our website, midpenmedia.org. At the Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, you can make your own videos and television programs and take classes in all aspects of media production. You can also hire our professional services team. To find out more about that, go to mcproservices.com. Congratulations to all our winners, and thank you for watching.